regulations, Article 4, site regulations, to add section 24.1, home occupation. Article 7, district regulations, section 207001, zoning district uses, and 4, Article, whoa, what is that? 18? Special use permit section, what's XBIII?
Should be
18, okay. Standards for non-discretionary land use permits, a home occupation. All right, and that's what everybody here, or some people here are here for. We have an amendment to our zoning ordinance. We only have one zoning ordinance. Every municipality only has one. So when you change it, you're just changing that ordinance. Now, this particular amendment started months ago. We came to this point where we had a first reading of a different amendment and got to the second reading, and that was the first one that anybody showed up for, participated in. So we decided at that time to send it back to planning, have a public hearing where we had people actually able to show up for it, and go through this process all over again. So we've had a lot of input, we've had a lot of discussion between many people. I'm somewhat confused as to why the huge interest outside of Flushing Township, because this zoning ordinance only affects Flushing Township. We do not affect anybody outside of our township. And the zoning ordinance is used everywhere to control property uses, how you use your property, and what you can and can't do with it. So we've had a lot of discussions. I've met with Buddy and Jen. We talked about it there. And I'm not sure what you're reading is different than what I'm reading, but a lot of what you said has gone into this current draft of this ordinance. We've changed things around, we've changed the structure of it, and it's really quite a bit different than where we started with. I made a lot of notes tonight from what people have said, because a lot of the discussion is, you can't do that, we're gonna sue you, we're gonna recall you, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that, but I've tried to figure out what is it you don't like? What is the problem that this ordinance is causing? What is it gonna do? And so that's what I've tried to decipher out of all of this.
It's hard to do when you cut us off, I must say.
No, stop.
No, I am, that's all I needed to say, but that's
The,
just the fact of the matter.
Discussion I had with Buddy here a short time ago was, he didn't feel that somebody that's simply growing in their house should come to the planning commission and request a special use permit. So we took that information and went back and talked to our attorney, talked to our planner, and said, well, why don't we set up two different sections instead of having it all under one, have it go simple in-home small growing operation. You just come into the office and it can get approved right at the office. You don't go to planning commission. Now, if you want a big, larger production of marijuana, that one has to go to planning commission. So the smaller, simpler ones, you can just come to the office, fill out the form, make sure you got your certificate, and we're good to go. The, one objection that I've heard a few times is, why is it in the home occupation section of the zoning ordinance? And there's a couple reasons for that. Mr. Moulton explained it pretty well at one of our meetings, in that because you're producing a product for somebody else, it's not for your own consumption, it's for another person. So you're giving it to them, selling it to them, trading it to them, whatever it is, what you're producing at your house is going somewhere else. And that amounts to what in the zoning ordinance is considered a home occupation.
5 people. 5
So,
people.
That's why it falls into this. This is what the Supreme Court said it should be in, and that's where we're gonna put it. So,
They didn't say that, that's
the title of it is immaterial. It's a home occupation because that's what the law says it
You
should be.
cannot pay
That's
taxes
not the
on it,
law.
sir.
That's not the law, Fred. That's not the law.
Are you a cannabis attorney, Mr. Moulton?
Completely contradicts the law.
Have you read cannabis law in Michigan entirely?
No.
Or do you read specifically city law and what you're allowed to interpret yourself? Because we have lots of questions that we cannot have answered because you shut us down.
Yep.
We have many, many, many questions about this for your attorney, for you, but you say shush
Yeah,
to us instead,
Like
which
right
is
now.
despicable of you.
yeah, it's ridiculous the way you operate in here. That's,
I've been to numerous of these, and this is one of the most disrespectful townships I've ever been to.
True story. Sorry, Fred. True story.
Many, many. You're only here because no one voted on, ran unopposed to you. You're nothing special, Mr. Thorsby. All you're doing is disrespecting citizens of your
All right,
township
you
that
gotta
want to
stop.
talk with you and Mr. Moulton.
So we're at a point where we have the information that the planning commission developed, and we made some changes that the planning commission did. So now we have the draft that you have in front of you tonight.
which is different from what they
And
voted on
the-
Monday night.
The,
There's no type 1 and type 2 caregiver, let's just get that across. If
Absolutely.
Mr. Moulton was a cannabis lawyer who could interpret the law properly, it would clearly state that you cannot say there's a step 1 and a step 2, a stage 2 and a stage 1 caregiver.
True.
Under your home occupation.
True, you're not understanding your
You're
laws.
not
Point of
understanding.
order.
You're not understanding,
No
sir. I'm
permits.
trying to do
Point
something
of order.
so,
positive,
let's,
and you're,
make a motion. I need a motion to put this on the floor. There's a text that's in front of you.
So motion.
Is there support?
I'll support that.
Alright. So, we have the text amendment as provided by the planning commission. And I've listened to, everybody speak about it. And a couple of things come to mind. A lot of people have complained about the 2 acres. Originally, we had suggested 5 acres, then it was reduced to 2 acres. The main difference is that now we've been able to put language in that prevents the use in a subdivision, a platted subdivision, a
anywhere.
condominium, site condominium, whatever those things are called, or a planned urban development. So rather than based on size of the lot, it's based more on how that lot is designated.
Can you acknowledge that this draft you're reading tonight is not the same draft that
I
planning
don't
voted
even
for
know what
Monday
you're
night?
talking about.
Oh, my goodness.
This is the one,
Trying to understand.
Fred.
Show you. I
There are
know.
changes in it didn't say 2 acres. It said
It
2
was
acres on
under
type
type
2.
two.
She keeps telling you guys.
just,
It
It's
says
trying to
changes.
understand type two, it's been
What
changed
you're
since the
reading.
vote, and now it's in type one.
It
You
is
guys-
not
you
explaining
guys
gotta
something
stop.
forward.
We have the copy right
It's right
here.
you
here,
guys gotta stop.
two different.
Stop calling something out that is absolutely unjustifiable.
Stop
Doesn't
talking.
even believe us, you guys.
That is
No,
ridiculous.
we have to stop talking because we're confused.
Big-
Oh my God.
Because we're catching up what's going on, Fred. You don't get to change language after the vote went in. The vote went in, the language has changed.
Yes.
We're calling you out for that, and you're telling us to be quiet.
Right.
We have the proof.
Right here.
Unbelievable.
Monday,
This is what,
tonight language.
this is what we're gonna consider right here. So,
So let's don't say it is what the planning commission forwarded, it's
Right.
not.
Thank you.
The language is different. And the outside interest is because this trickles into the other areas that the rest of us live in.
We got this idea from the Byron case, so clearly it affects every municipality.
Type 2 was on the second part.
Why is there a type 1 and 2?
Question. Because it's
Can we
in-
ask
it's
a question
in-
and have an
it's in-
answer?
it's
Hey,
in the
hey.
building.
guys,
I have
We
a
can't-
question
I'm-
when I was able to
Excuse
speak
me.
yeah,
publicly,
he's
sir.
talking, he's talking. You're
No,
interrupting.
he's gonna start yelling. Go ahead, sir.
Don't yell at me, sir, go ahead. I'll wait.
On this 2 acres, if that wasn't there, that would not change the meaning or the scope of this, ordinance, or would it?
It would.
Yes, it would.
Absolutely.
Good question.
Well, that seems to be, that's one issue that seems to have generated a lot of concern, is the 2 acres. And you had, the assessor look up how many parcels in Flushing Township had 2 acres or more. And it came out to 1,400 and some, I think, out of 4,000, 4,500. So a little less than half.
A little more than 25%.
Yeah.
So no, you're right, we could take the 2 acres out and specify the location as being not allowed in a subdivision, basically.
They can control odor.
Why? They can caregive for themselves as well.
People live in houses. Anybody that lives in a house can be a caregiver.
It's classic.
Why are you trying to regulate that? Seriously.
Bill?
You know, I just want to comment on this. I mean, I try to listen to people and look at both sides, and I do give you guys a lot of credit because you did a lot of work on this. But I have personal knowledge of situations where there is not a mechanism then to take care of things. My mom had a house in Mount Morris Township, and I had a neighbor over there, and he was a caregiver, okay, for his girlfriend. She had a worse drug problem, so he thought he could grow the pot for her. And, you know, I hear on here that, well, you know, the growers do not advertise. Well, yes, they do. They advertise by that skunk odor, which the criminal element of the drug trade, you may laugh at this, but I'll tell you what.
I will.
Drug addiction is not a qualifying condition under the state of Michigan.
No, what I'm saying here,
Hold on, listen.
what I'm saying, you're not listening to the story here.
Okay, let's listen.
Now, there were some out-of-state perpetrators who knew that he was growing this. They went ahead, he had 4 little boys, and in the middle of the night, armed guns trying to bust in the garage and bust in the door. And that's the kind of violence that you need this mechanism in there for. And I'll tell you what, try selling a house, look at your property values. You know, I took care of my mom for her last years, okay? And then, you know, you try to go ahead and sell a house when you get that pungent smell there, plus the violence, bullets everywhere. That's what
Unbelievable.
That's the truth.
That is false, is what that
Police
is.
report on it.
What you did just do was prove my point to a caregiver should not have to live within their grow.
So do you guys wanna be able to participate in this process? or
He's
not?
saying caregivers are dangerous.
No, I'm saying that you gotta have a criminal element, that's like a subculture of it, and, you know, ordinances and laws are passed to protect everybody. You know, if somebody was to go ahead and try to bust in there with the same scenario, it would be protecting you too.
People have laws already, it's 2008 law, we're operating safely
All I
already.
know is none of my neighbors know that I grow marijuana at all. So
That's right.
that is
It's supposed to be a
absolutely-
secret.
That's right.
This was
And I live in a subdivision.
this was in a garage.
With,
The
This was
police
in-
chief
this was
said
in-
good
this
for
was-
you, it doesn't matter where it is,
on
sir.
armed robberies in Flushing
People get broken
Township.
into all the time.
I was trying to share a story.
Right.
I was
Well,
trying
it's
to,
dangerous.
It's irrelevant, you just called us all criminals. because
Exactly.
of the pungent smell,
I
sir.
did not call you guys all
You said we smell like
criminals.
skunk.
There's a lot of things that invite crime to your home. A lot of things that invite crime to your home.
This guy's saying.
Let's hear from the police chief. how
So
many
you're saying that
armed
weed is
robberies
dangerous,
he
what your
had.
story was, caregivers are dangerous people to live by, is what you're trying to say. Come on, listen to him.
Folks, if I may, we need to respect the process.
No problem, go ahead, sir.
They're not, I couldn't.
Let me speak. We need to respect the process. This is not an open forum.
We tried
It's a
that to
committee
inform at the podium, sir.
Turn
We
over
tried
to
respect.
Supervisor Thorsby. This is not a debate, folks.
When is there going
We're
to be
asking
one?
you to
rights.
respect
What
the
are they up for
process.
debate? They're state rights.
They don't even know what they're voting on, sir.
We're asking that you respect the process.
You cannot
You just called us
dictate
criminals.
If you-
Otherwise, all the farmers would be,
Fred.
regulated.
How many
Fred,
armed
Yeah.
robberies have you had in?
I wanted to
Flushing
share
Township?
that because I wanted them to see
And
the other
grow.
side. You notice when they brought up their things, we did not attack them.
Right.
Right.
That was last week.
But I was trying to share a story. This is, like I said, he had these 4 little boys, and because that odor, they broke in, they were trying to steal his product. as you should-
Who said it was because of the odor? Who stated it was because of the odor?
Let
Is it gonna
the
be illegal now?
trustees speak, or we're gonna clear the
I just
room,
want you to
and we'll
take
finish
that
this
in
debate.
consideration, that criminal element,
guys wanna be
you
able to
guys could also
participate.
be a victim of it.
Don't threaten us, Fred.
We've been growing for 13 years
Don't worry
safely.
about
Go come, drove by my house, it's so beautiful.
We grew in your
It's
community.
gorgeous.
Your communities. We've got a couple chiefs here. How many times have our grows, our
We're
caregiver
gonna
grows
finish this
been a
process
nuisance?
Either with you or without you.
We have to be
Have
part
it
of the
whichever way
discussion.
you want it.
They didn't let us discuss it, so we're here to discuss it, I'm sorry.
No, you're not, you're just talking. And the board needs to have a chance to discuss it, because they haven't had a chance to discuss it,
We know.
and it's their ordinance.
We didn't even read it. We all have to follow.
We have vehicles.
We go back to that, what I was saying, the, number 2 there, if the sentence started with, it cannot be located, so the words shall have a minimum of lot size of 2 acres, and if that was removed, which what I was throwing out there, I don't believe that's gonna change the
Intent of the ordinance.
intent would maintain it.
It does,
And
but
that
it's
is a-
2 acres.
Excuse me.
You can't grow
Excuse me.
2 acres. So that's why it does change it. And you have 2 different versions, right here from Monday night to tonight.
We've heard you before. So if that was out of that was a lot of the complaints that I heard tonight. That would do away with 1. I'm wondering if there was anything else that has could have the same effect besides that.
So remove the requirement for a minimum of 2 acres.
Would that be on both of those sections, Fred?
Yeah. And then, one issue that has come up periodically is how much floor space do you use to calculate 25%? So you have 25% of, the square footage of the house. So, the planning commission picked an option where you could consider the square footage of the house plus the square footage of the basement if the basement is being used to grow the marijuana in, which opens up a lot more floor space. Basically doubles your floor space.
So it's 25% of the total usable space being that it's the ground floor
Right.
and the basement, and you can have 25% of it.
Yeah, if they have a basement. Um, 200 amps. We had suggested that it not be more than 200 amp service. Let me see.
That's what it says.
On the second page.
Number
Number
4.
Number 4.
Okay.
I don't see why that should be in there, because what's that got to do with anything, really?
Right.
Exactly.
You want me to speak as these issues come up, or do
Yes.
you want me to?
Yeah,
All right.
yes.
Under the ordinance, and I'd like to see what it is you are suggesting was approved at the planning commission that is now different. What is it you have with you?
May I show you this,
Yes,
both the
please.
drafts?
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Don't give up custody.
Thank you.
So this is the draft 3 that they voted on Monday night. And if you notice, it's right here on page 2, and it's number 2. So this is what they voted on, cannot be located on the property. You notice there's no 2 acre, okay? This is the same one, this is number 2, and it has now been changed to have the 2 acre allotment included under type 4.
What they were working from was a working copy that both Caitlin and I had made some suggested optional modifications to. This is what they were working from, so I don't know what that is that
This
you
is
have
what they
there.
handed out at
You
the
got it on
planning
the table.
commission Monday night. This is what I printed out at Flushing Township page today. This is what they voted on. It was originally, let me show you here, it's under type 2. The 2 acres was originally under.
By the time we had the planning commission meeting last Monday night, there had already been another working draft prepared, and that's what the planning commission was working
Well,
from.
this is what they gave us at the planning member meeting that night to read out. Then they read it and they said that it was under type 2 for the 2 acres. Now that has been taken out,
Well, we're
the
talking-
reply has been taken out of the type 2 and put on the type 1.
So,
Good point, Jen, thank you.
one of the issues that was raised was that the version the board is considering is different from what had been approved by the planning commission. Understand, under the Zoning Enabling Act, the state statute that all municipalities operate under, when they're adopting their original zoning ordinance or when they're amending it, gives the board 3 options when an ordinance, a zoning ordinance amendment comes to them from the planning commission. They can adopt it without change, they can amend it and adopt it, or they can send it back to the planning commission for further consideration. Those of you that have been involved for several weeks in this process realize that the first amendment regarding medical marijuana patient caregivers came up to the board, and we were to the point of the second reading, the actual adoption of that proposed amendment, before there was any public attention paid to this. It had gone through the planning commission stage, and that's where the public hearing is held.
That's
That's-
because that's the way
But
we're.
we're
Hold
going
on.
to start it now.
Look, I didn't interrupt you when you were speaking, I would ask for the same courtesy.
I apologize, thank you.
So it went back. This board didn't adopt that first ordinance amendment that was proposed by the planning commission. Folks came in, some of you were part of that audience at the time, and the board sent it back, and the planning commission reopened the public hearing. And a number of you attended that public hearing. That is the occasion where you have the opportunity to engage in a give and take with the planning commission members, and you're not limited to public comment or the time limit on public comment. So the planning commission went through that process. So the fact that what we, well,
It's not,
They cut us off every time.
so
in any event,
then you can't.
the planning commission made a decision on a version of an amendment that was then forwarded to the board for consideration this evening. The board is not handcuffed to the language that the planning commission is recommending be adopted as the amendment. This board has the authority, I'm oversimplifying here, but the planning commission is a subset of the board. The board has the authority to adopt the amendment. The board can amend the amendment as recommended by the planning commission. And what Mr. Thorsby was attempting to do was get the board discussion on what they want to do in terms of the actual language of the amendment. So at this point, the process is limited to discussion among board members, no matter how strongly you feel about the comments the board members are making. So give them the time to discuss and decide what they want to do. You have other options if you don't like the final amendment as approved by the board. But yelling at us isn't getting your side advanced, and it certainly isn't enabling the board to accomplish their job.
You guys voting without understanding is why we're here.
Absolutely.
This problem is happening. We know
Yep.
what to put on this ordinance, and you guys don't. You're stepping into the wrong territory.
Hold on,
We are here to talk to you. Why do you keep saying that? We're not just gonna shut up.
I'm not sure you're as informed as you think you are. Your attorney that was here, he mentioned DeRuyter, and that obviously is the key case. But after DeRuyter was decided, there was another case decided by the Court of Appeals, where the trial court and the Court of Appeals had upheld the patient caregiver's position in an ordinance that was adopted by York Township. I don't even know where the charter township of York is in the state of Michigan. But in any event,
B3, add an outdoor gardening. Can we talk about outdoor for a minute?
let me read 2 lines from this opinion. This is out of the Court of Appeals case that was issued in January of this year. And in that case, the trial court upheld the patient caregiver, said that the local unit of government couldn't regulate because the state had preempted the field of regulation with regard to patient caregivers. The Court of Appeals affirmed. Then that case went up to the Supreme Court. By that time, DeRuyter had just been issued. The Supreme Court said, we're not going to take this up on appeal. We're going to send it back to you, Court of Appeals. Take another look at your decision upholding the patient caregiver's position in view of our decision in DeRuyter. And that the court reversed its position, upheld the township ordinance, and in their opinion they state, both the Byron Township ordinance and the York Township ordinance, and I'm quoting, allow for the cultivation of medical marijuana by primary caregivers as a home occupation and require that the caregiver cultivate the marijuana inside a residence. So,
It's in litigation.
Right, because it's in litigation because they cannot say that
No,
medical marijuana caregiver can in fact be a home occupation. That is also up for discussion with plenty of courts. Have you looked into
well,
that?
this is a Court of Appeals interpreting a Supreme Court decision.
Which, and I understand that, sir, but also when they do something like that with the Court of Appeals with medical marijuana caregivers, and they do say something like, you are now an occupation, they would have
This
to
is the
amend the
Court of
MMA in
Appeals.
2008
This
also
is the
to
court-
allow that language in there,
Okay,
sir.
I'm not gonna get into a debate with you, but it's my
That's
job.
why we're here,
No, it's not, no,
is to have the
No.
same understanding as the next person.
no.
You're
Yes,
required
it
to
is.
understand the law you're
We
going
need to
to
figure this out so we don't have to go to court. Go ahead, sir.
Alright, it's part of my job to explain to the township board members what the current law, in my opinion, I admit it's my opinion, reading what appears to be pretty clear in this opinion,
Exactly, an open interpretation.
as to what the township board can and can't do within the scope of regulating medical marijuana caregivers.
Well, you can't ban a caregiver.
How many cannabis lawyers did you have a meeting with before you made these decisions?
You guys wanna do special land use? He just said that people get broken into when they know where they are at, and now you want us to come up and tell you where we live at, and put our name on the internet.
And
That is
we're criminal
ridiculous, you guys. Nobody's gonna do a special land use, I promise, nobody's doing that. That's so dangerous,
Nobody's gonna sign up for a permit either.
crazy.
So are you thinking, Bill W., that we might not consider having the 200 amp
Yeah,
service?
I see that there's no stipulation as to, because if, I don't know for sure, but I would think if I wanted 200 amps at my house because I had stereo equipment or whatever, I don't know, that I'd just call consumers and tell them, and I'd pay for it, and that's all it would be good. So in this particular case, I don't see as the 200 ends, really.
If you have a valid point, Caitlin indicated that other local units of government, if they want to regulate amperage to residential customers beyond what Consumers Energy already does, then maybe that shouldn't be part of this particular ordinance. We might want to put it in the police power ordinance or in part of the construction code.
Yeah,
It might be better.
zoning permit or something.
Yeah.
And then I have one other question here.
Yeah.
Down number 7, it's deemed necessary for, let's see, for people to inspect this.
Yeah.
I don't think all these people should be involved. This is township staff, you know.
Well, the reason that was added in your bill was originally we had township staff, and some of the people here in the audience complained that, well, that could be any staff in the building.
I don't want to do it.
No, exactly.
I don't think any
No.
of them, but that's
So,
what it says.
so to solve that,
So what I would assume would be good would be a building inspector, the code enforcement officer, and police officer. And that should be it. I don't see any reason that anybody else would wanna go through what somebody else's house.
no, they're not going to, yeah.
Yeah, that wouldn't be good.
Yeah.
Other than that, I read the whole thing and I see nothing else in it.
So we're looking at, you're saying just building inspector, code enforcement officer, and police personnel. Correct?
Yeah, that's what Bill said, yeah. You got,
I think-
she was just clarifying that you were asking that it only include building inspector, code enforcement officer, or police personnel.
Right.
Gonna take out or township staff as determined by the board.
Yeah.
Right.
I've cleaned it up a little.
Yeah.
Anybody else have any?
Let's go back to number 4. What would we do with 4, conduct not required maintenance?
Just remove it.
Well, can we just strike?
Then eliminate number 4?
Yeah, that's what I would think.
Right.
Now it's, number 5, now number 4.
Yes.
Yeah,